The moment the gavel fell, the blood drained from his face, and I knew it was over. Not just the court case, not just his pathetic empire, but the entire, terrifying, decade-long performance he called fatherhood. He was finally staring into the abyss he'd created, and this time, there was no one to save him. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The real story started 6 years earlier, not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a deadbolt. I was 19, home from my first year of college on summer break, and excited to finally show my father, Robert, the Dean's List certificate. He was a successful architect, meticulous and intimidating, but I always craved his approval. I'd walked into his home office, buzzing with pride, and placed the certificate on his mahogany desk. He barely glanced up. "Did you read my email about the partnership offer for the firm?" he asked, his voice low and devoid of warmth. "Dad, I just got back. I was going to read it later, but look, I got a 4.0 this semester." He slammed his hand on the desk. The sound made me jump out of my skin. "Later? You think my life's work operates on your timeline? You are being offered a mentorship with a firm that controls half the skyline of this city, and you're talking about a grade. You are so self-centered, Amelia." The words didn't shock me, they were just a louder version of the background noise of my life. But then he did something new. He picked up the expensive, framed certificate, tore it cleanly in half, and dropped the pieces into the wastebasket. "You're not good enough for this firm. Not smart enough. You don't have the killer instinct," he sneered, leaning back in his chair. "I'm passing the opportunity to your cousin, Mark. He has backbone. You, Amelia, are a disappointment." My vision blurred. It wasn't the certificate. It was the final, vicious confirmation that I was disposable. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach, like a stone dropped into icy water. He didn't want a daughter. He wanted a miniature version of himself, and since I failed the audition, he was replacing me with his nephew. People talk about betrayals being shocking, but for me, it was a slow burn, like a house fire that starts in the insulation. Robert had always been about control. Every vacation was planned down to the minute, every outfit I wore was pre-approved, and every friend was vetted for suitability. But when I was a kid, I saw it differently. I saw a man who was powerful. I remember being about 7 years old, standing outside the model for a high-rise he designed. It was a glittering tower of glass and steel. He knelt down beside me, pointing up at the rendering. "See that, honey," he'd said, his voice surprisingly soft. "I built that. I made something from nothing. And one day, you're going to be even better than me. You'll be unstoppable." He hugged me tight, and for a fleeting moment, I felt safe, cherished, and chosen. That memory was my anchor for years, the belief that his sternness was just tough love designed to make me unstoppable. But tearing that certificate proved the truth. His love was conditional, and when I didn't meet his impossible standard, he didn't just withdraw his love. He actively sought to replace me. He wasn't building me up. He was building a mold I was supposed to fit, and Mark fit it better. Mark, the golden boy. Robert mentored him through college, gave him a high-paying job, and publicly groomed him to take over the firm. While I was scrambling to pay my tuition and working 2 waitressing jobs, Mark was flying private to client meetings, living in the condo Robert bought him, and being introduced as the future of the company. I finished college, moved to a tiny apartment in the city, and slowly began building my own career in business development. I cut Robert and his family out, putting 200 miles and a wall of silence between us. I needed to breathe. But cutting off the connection didn't stop the pain. Every promotion, every small victory felt hollow because the person whose respect I'd craved most was still holding me up against the light and finding me wanting. I didn't want his approval anymore. I wanted him to see the caliber of person he had carelessly thrown away. The opportunity for revenge came disguised as a business failure. Robert was obsessed with securing the contract for the new $300 million revitalization project, a massive redevelopment that would define the next decade of his firm. He'd bragged about it for months to the local news. The night he found out he lost the bid, he was a wreck, calling my mother, screaming, blaming the city council, the economy, anyone but himself. I heard about the loss from a former colleague, and a tiny, cold spark ignited inside me. I didn't want to just succeed without him. I wanted to succeed over him. I used my network to get a job at the development company that won the contract, the one Robert lost. My goal wasn't just to work there, it was to manage that project. The next 2 years were a blur of 16-hour days. I learned the construction side, the zoning complexities, and the political landscape. I was ruthless, focused, and utterly determined. If you're still listening and can appreciate a strong woman working to get her due, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens next. Finally, at 27, I was promoted to Senior Development Manager for the revitalization project. The press release was glowing, and my face was on the front page of the business section, the same section where Robert had previously gloated about his guaranteed win. The time for a subtle win was over. The time for the direct hit had arrived. The climax wasn't a shouting match. It was a slow, agonizing realization for him. The first move was a public relations masterstroke. I organized a massive press conference to unveil the project's new architectural concept. I knew Robert would be watching, he couldn't not watch the project that should have been his. At the podium, I introduced the new design team, and then, I revealed the name of the lead architect we had hired to execute the vision. It was Mark. Not because I liked Mark, but because I knew Robert had poured all his ego, money, and time into grooming Mark to be his successor. Now, I was Mark's client, controlling the biggest contract of his career. Robert had lost his legacy project, and, worse, lost his protégé to his disappointment of a daughter. The reporters were buzzing. I felt the triumph surging through me, but I kept my face calm. I was professional, poised, and utterly dominant. A week later, I initiated the second phase, the corporate strike. Robert's firm was struggling financially due to the massive investment he'd sunk into the failed bid. I knew he was desperate for capital. I arranged a private meeting with him under the guise of offering a consulting opportunity on a smaller satellite project. He walked into the glass-walled conference room, trying to project his old arrogance, but his eyes were tired, and his suit looked a little worn. "Amelia," he said, forcing a tight smile. "I'm glad you finally came to your senses. You need my experience." I slid a contract across the table. It wasn't a consulting agreement. It was an offer to acquire his firm. His eyes scanned the document, his breath catching when he saw the incredibly low, but legally sound, acquisition price. "This is an insult," he hissed, throwing the contract back. "I'll never sell to you." I leaned forward, my voice a quiet, steel trap. "You don't have a choice, Dad. You mortgaged the building, the land, and every asset you own to finance the revitalization bid. That was all public record. My company holds the majority of that debt, bought cheaply in the secondary market. If you don't sign, I call the note, and in 90 days, your precious firm is foreclosed upon, and you lose everything. This offer is your only path to a small, quiet retirement." The color drained from his face for the second time that year. He realized I didn't just outcompete him. I used his own reckless mistakes and his public financial arrogance as the very weapons of his downfall. He had preached the killer instinct to me for 2 decades, and now, I was using it to execute him. He looked at me with raw, undisguised hatred. You really are a viper. Just like your mother always said. I picked up the pen and put it in his shaking hand. Sign the paper, Robert, or watch me tear down your life's work, brick by painful brick. He signed. The signature was messy, a broken echo of the powerful man who had once shredded my accomplishments. The moment I walked out of that conference room, the weight I'd carried for years dissolved. I didn't feel hatred anymore. I felt a vast, cold relief. I didn't acquire his company to run it. I acquired it to dissolve it, selling off the assets and settling the debts. He watched his legacy disappear, piece by piece, an architectural phantom on the skyline. He never got the chance to watch me take over. He never got to claim my success as his own. He simply faded into a small, irrelevant life, forgotten by the industry that once idolized him. I had done what I set out to do: make him small, cold, and replaceable. My revenge wasn't loud or violent. It was precise, legal, and utterly complete. It wasn't about teaching him a lesson. It was about reclaiming the power he had stolen from me, the power to define my own worth. I learned that the greatest strength isn't in what you build, but in what you are willing to let go of and demolish to secure your own freedom. If you had the chance to dismantle the career of the person who betrayed you most, would you take it, or would you choose to simply walk away? Tell me in the comments below.